All right, well, hello. So, when I signed on to do a panel, I wanted to do one about fan fiction, original fiction, for reasons which will become obvious. See if this works. Ho ho. Hello, I'm Yves. I wrote a book, wrote a lot of other things that are on my website, which will be linked at the end. I have taught 2 courses to date on fiction generally. I did talk about fan fiction in both courses because, of course, I did. And I'm hoping to someday make it online, digitally available version, maybe do some kind of synchronous, asynchronous, who knows what. But suffice to say that I have some experience in teaching some amount of writing perspective with an inclusion of fan fiction. And also, obviously, I've just written a lot of fan fiction. There's not that much available under, you know, associated with the Yves name because a lot of reasons. But suffice to say, I've written a lot of fan fiction. I've written almost every kind of fan fiction you can imagine a person writing. I have definitely read every kind of fan fiction you can imagine a person writing, and I have a lot of interest in the subject. In fact, I have so much interest that when I started thinking about how to approach the topic, I did wonder, and I named it, can fan fiction make you a better writer, which implies some ambiguity as to whether it can. But when I started trying to really debate the subject with myself, I realized that there was possibly too much to say. It's a discussion that's been done absolutely to death at this point. I don't know if anyone's being convinced. Every time I brought up the idea, I got the same reaction, which was, does anyone really still think that it makes you a worse writer? And the answer is yes, but I realized that there was a certain level on which I wasn't really going to convince those people, I think, in a 30-minute panel being held on the official DashCon 2 server. I just didn't think that it was really audience-wise going to function. So I decided that maybe I would just focus on how it can be done. But if you still don't believe that it can make you a better writer, I still think this will do its absolute best to convince you. Because let's say hypothetically, right? Let's throw everything else away, and let's say for the sake of argument that generally speaking, fan fiction absolutely makes you a worse writer, and no one should be doing it, and we're all wasting our time on fan fiction. Even if this were the case, we're all still doing it. I mean, is anyone in this room really going to say, no, I don't read fan fiction, I don't write fan fiction, I have no interest in fan fiction, and I'm going to stop reading and writing fan fiction right now because something came out of the sky and told me that I shouldn't be doing it? No, no one is going to do that. So let's assume for the sake of argument that fan fiction should never be done by anybody and that it actually does make you worse and that, it doesn't help to practice writing and none of the challenges of fan fiction are similar to the challenges one would do to try to improve one's writing in other contexts. If we're already here and we're already all going to die here, let's make the best of it, right? So with that in mind, here are some examples primarily from my original fiction on how one can use the things you learn writing fan fiction in writing original fiction. And this way, if we're all going to die here anyway, at least we might get something out of it. So I want to start with prose, which I think is the thing that the fewest people think fan fiction is making you worse at, but there are still people who say this. I want to give you some examples. So here are here are 3 paragraphs, but they're 2 sections, and I'm going to read them to you. So the first section reads as following. I'll make my report as if I told a story, for I was taught as a child on my home world that truth is a matter of the imagination. The soundest fact may fail or prevail in the style of its telling, like that singular organic jewel of our seas, which grows brighter as one woman wears it, and, worn by another, dulls and goes to dust. Facts are no more solid, coherent, round, and real than pearls are, but both are sensitive. The story is not all mine, nor told by me alone. Indeed, I am not sure whose story it is. You can judge better. But it is all one, and if at moments the facts seem to alter with an altered voice, why then you can choose the fact you like best. Yet none of them are false, and it is all one story. The other passage begins, I may remove this from my account. No doubt it is inaccurate, if not openly disrespectful, and I am not sure myself that I intend for anyone to see it. Estervin's journals do not mention this night. In some ways, it would be better to pretend that it had not happened, that I had been too fearful or too brave, and that our relationship had been platonic, if cautious. Now I consider that his wishes may outweigh mine, if that is what drove his transcription. Perhaps he felt the same as I do, that one language is not enough to discuss the experience, and using no language would feel too much. In either case, I must have this record for myself, to remember, to confirm what I already know. Some day, when the snow of Gethin is an elusive dream, and the touch of Estervin's hand a memory I cannot adequately describe, I will know this to be true. The rest is inconsequential. So, one of these is by Ursula K. Le Guin, and it's from her book, The Left Hand of Darkness. And one of them is me. I wrote it in my fan fiction for the book, The Left Hand of Darkness. I did my best to write it, so to speak, canon compliant, with the exception that the canon explicitly says this never happened. And I printed it physically on paper that looked as similar as possible to my edition so I could tuck it into my mass market copy. And I handed it out. I initially wrote it when I was in a course that was reading this book. And I was like, if anyone else was upset as I was that this didn't happen, here you go. And the other day, I got a text from a friend which opened with, I hope this is still your number. So that's how you know it was kind of a while ago. And said, I was packing up all of my things to move, and my sister took my book, my copy of The Left Hand of Darkness off the shelf, and your fic fell out. And she said, I don't remember this chapter. I was like, yes, yes, yes. I mean, I hope their sister enjoyed it. I also said, can I post this on Tumblr? So the point that I'm trying to make here is a pretty simple one, which is that one of the most common writing exercises is to imitate someone else's writing. And I think this is something that fan fiction very often teaches very well, and particularly making no claims as to how fan fiction should be written. In my personal experience, I really like fan fiction that makes me feel as though the person writing it is like perfectly mimicking the original prose style of the text. In this case, this was some time ago, I don't remember the exact details, but I don't believe that I referenced the opening of the book. I think I just wrote it, in my mind in the style of the book. And when I went back to try to find anything that was similar, I thought these were pretty close. There are a lot of things that because, I wrote it, I can see things that I would change. I can see things that I would try to make closer to the original style of prose. But I think it's pretty similar. And I think that the obvious thing that's taught me was what I like in prose, what my writing is, what someone else's writing is, in this case, Ms. Le Guin's. There's a lot going on that is very specific to the book in this prose, that you're getting not just, a narrator, but you're getting this very diaristic narrator, and it's this kind of fail guy from Earth. I highly recommend the book, by the way. You should read The Left Hand of Darkness. It's much gayer than anyone is going to tell you. And weirdly more non-binary, but that's neither here nor there. The style of prose, to imitate it, you have to get very in character, right? And though this was a point where I was already, fairly well into my original fiction experience, I learned a lot going back to fan fiction because I'd taken kind of a hiatus, I admit, and making the effort to explicitly try to imitate someone's prose, because for a very long time I just couldn't kind of writing my own. Let's see. So I thought I'd give you an example of what my original fiction prose looks like for something that was written after this. This is from a piece about a trans woman who's competing in a reality television competition. It's kind of giving Fear Factor. I pretended it wasn't, but it's kind of giving Fear Factor. And she gets into a bit of a dispute over who is being set up with a man on the show by the producers. So I want to read you this bit to give you an example of my prose when I'm just kind of writing my own thing. This is good television, said Vidalia. Two women fighting over a man? Captivating. It would be even better if we kissed. You're insane, Shiloh said now, finally seeming to find her footing. This was a good footing to find with Vidalia. The camera crew shifted their feet, zooming in and out. I was being serious, Vidalia said. And then, what's in it for you if you meet that tiger? Shiloh gave her a strange, squinting look. Her eyes were the color of water in narrow canals, stippled, and with a shadow to them that made them look as if they were moving when they weren't. Vidalia was sad for a moment. They were almost certainly not going to kiss after all. So this is from Paper Tigress. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on. It's funny because any piece of prose that I found that I wrote felt like it was not fully representative of all of the different things that I do, because of course, the things that I've been more or less explicitly compared to by other people, people have been very nice to me and said that my work reads like Carmen Machado's, or that it reads kind of like Lemony Snicket's. This is kind of giving both neither and also Tori Peters, because I wrote this after reading Detransition Baby, which if you have not read, you should read. It's an excellent book. If you have not read Stag Dance, the book that Ms. Peters came out with this year, you should read that. It is my best book of the year so far. And she's very cynical. There's a lot of transgender, cisgender drama. There's a lot of trans on trans drama, to be honest with you. But I think also that what you see here is this approach that's almost Poundian. If anyone recalls Ezra Pound, that unfortunate evil man, who, back in the day was one of the modernists who felt that every word should serve a purpose. You should not write any more than is necessary. I've gone back and forth on this front, and I still go back and forth. I think there's a lot of utility to not pinning yourself down to one thing, obviously. But now my prose runs a lot more, I think, utilitarian in the sense that everything is there for a reason, and everything is exactly as long as it needs to be to make the point. Hopefully, ideally. If you disagree, that's very good for you because you get to make another note for yourself in the kind of prose that you prefer. There's description, but it's very specific and, in this beat moment where instead of saying, there was a beat, there was a pause, I can convey that by giving a description, by giving us the feeling that Vidalia is maybe taking a moment to observe rather than to speak or to think about anything else. And I think this is something that I learned over time from, reading a lot of fiction, obviously, both fan fiction and original fiction, and looking at a lot of different types of prose and thinking to myself, wow, I really like this, or oh my God, I absolutely hate this. And it's funny because in this case, you could still make the argument, how original can it be if you knew that you were inspired by Tori Peters' work? But I think if you were to read her work and read this, you would find that it's quite different. And I think is a good, perhaps, reminder of the fact that no one's ever really defined fan fiction very well, nor is there, I think, a definition that would work in every case. Okay, we're getting to the weeds now. Plot. People love to talk about fanfiction plots, about whether the plots are good, whether they're bad. Well, and I'll say it again. If you think that fanfiction writing is terrible, you can always read it and then decide to just do the opposite. I'm making that sound like it's very easy, but it's something that you can do. But even here, I think there's a lot of things we can learn from fanfiction, even if it's the worst thing on earth. One thing that I really, really love about fanfiction is that I think that it has a sense for the absolute heart of plot, which, in my personal opinion, the way that I like to plot, I like to focus on character, goals, motivation, conflict, what the character wants, why they want it, why they can't get it. And fanfiction is very good at this. Particularly when we talk about the stereotypical fanfiction, the, shipping fanfiction, the let's see if these characters can make this work out fanfiction. Because it does something that a lot of fiction is really concerned with, which is intimacy. So here's a very, very short piece that I want to pull out of my novelette Longline. And this happens right after these two gamers. What if we were gamers and, we had a weird situation, long distance, over Discord. What exactly? What if we were gamers? So this comes right after Annalise has made some perhaps out of pocket comments on the, I guess, guild captain Beck's voice while she thought he was in the bathroom, but maybe he was there, and everyone is leaving the call, and this happens. A few more people drop out of the call, and then they're the only two left. Annalise waits patiently, listening to the light humming sound of Beck's breath on the other end. Beck locks the voice channel. Did you mean what you said? He asks. So I'll be honest with you. This one's explicit. That's why there's such a short excerpt. But I think it serves a really good purpose, in part because, well, let's be honest about what most fanfiction and the most stereotypical fanfiction is, but because I think that this is a moment of great tension um, for both of them. Because, and I think this is something in particular, this is one of the reasons that people are so cruel to fanfiction, is that human intimacy is seen for whatever reason as a very womanly thing to give a fuck about. Pardon my French. Um, and that, we're all supposed to be writing about, I guess, the world ending and, giant lizards killing all of us. And, I'm not saying that's not interesting. It's very interesting. My sibling will watch any movie that has The Rock in it. So I've seen a lot of these films. But I think it's just as important to the average person. How do other people perceive you? Do they like you? And particularly in a society that is so obsessed with, you have to get married and have children or you are not worth anything. There's so much fear. And sure, absolutely, especially I think for women who are basically told you don't have any worth outside of how much you are worth to a man romantically or sexually. There's so much fear about, am I going to find somebody? And particularly, again, I think it's not surprising that women who are also told the only way that you can have any stability, that you can have any resources, are through the man that you're married to. It's not surprising that this is something of a lot of concern for people. Even if in this case, I'll just tell you right now, this is not a piece about getting heterosexually married and having babies. So sorry to anyone who came to the fan fiction panel at DashCon 2 and was expecting that. Nonetheless, it's very concerning. If someone says something that implies they want you, and then you ask them if they meant that, well, why do you care? Do you like them? I mean, did they mean it? What if they did mean it? What are you going to do? And if you're the person who's made that comment, and now you're being asked if you meant it, well, good luck, because now, all you can do is you have to either, are you going to lie? Because I'll be honest, she did mean it. Or are you going to say, well, I meant it, but not that way? What if you did mean it? What if they don't like you back? It's really frightening. Um, and I guess if you want to find out whether she meant it, you'll have to read the story. But I'll tell you right now, she did. She did, homosexually speaking. Now we're getting to the weeds. People really think that if you read and write fan fiction, you're not learning anything about character writing. And I understand why, like where this comes from, right? Because I think that people are kind of imagining that if you're writing, you know, what if Kylo Ren was in high school, that you've been handed Kylo Ren by everybody involved in Star Wars, and so you don't have to do any work. Which, needless to say, I think you're doing a lot of work if you're trying to figure out who this grown man in a science fiction setting would be if he were a teenager in a realistic fiction context. Um, I love that the entire chat is just weed now because I said that. But particularly, I wanted to read you, this is a bit of a longer piece, so you're going to have to strap in a little bit. A longer piece to get across what writing about characters, any characters, does for the reader and for the writer, and the ways in which you can use what you've learned in fan fiction to get across character in an original fiction setting. And I will say the last one, Longline, and this one, Band Girls, both were very, very heavily inspired by the things that I thought fan fiction was doing better than some traditionally published fiction. So there's intentionally or otherwise a very, I think, fan fiction-y air to the focus on character, romance, intimacy. So this piece is about two possibly rival musical acts. There's Lisbeth, who is kind of like if Sophie and Mitski and like Rebecca Sugar were the same thing. She's very synth focused, does everything herself, bedroom producer, um, and very, is this music I'm supposed to dance to or is this music I'm supposed to cry to? And the other group is Malice Underground, and they're kind of failing to do anything, but they're honestly pretty much, what if Bowling for Soup had girls in it? Was my perspective writing this. And Lisbeth and the lead singer of Malice Underground just keep meeting up in all sorts of places. It's really quite inconvenient. It's almost like somebody is trying to pair them together. So this is pretty early in the piece. Malice is around the corner, slouching among the dumpsters and the discarded milk crates, examining a pack of cigarettes in her right hand. When Lisbeth appears, Malice pulls a lighter from her pocket and flips the pack open. Lisbeth shakes her head at the offer. Malice seems unsurprised to see her. Lisbeth, says Malice. 20 perfect white circles peek out at Lisbeth from the open pack. Malice, says Lisbeth. Malice laughs. That's not my name, she says. It's the act. What is your name? Asks Lisbeth, unused to the separation. I thought you saw it on the sign-up sheet, says Malice. And, when Lisbeth shows no signs of comprehending, for the recording rooms. Another thing Lisbeth is unused to, checking for real names. Joelle, says Malice, brandishing the pack of cigarettes at Lisbeth. Joe. Joe Calderon, thinks Lisbeth. She nods. Under Lisbeth's curious gaze, Joe at last excavates a cigarette and attempts, poorly, to light it. She fails, and tries again. So whose van was that? Author note, she's referring to the van that she helped Lisbeth load earlier. Lisbeth watches Joe struggle. There is not a breath of wind in the air. My classmates, she says. He couldn't make it to her show, but he lent her the car. She hopes he passes midterm. Knew it. Figured you'd have a cuter car. Joe misses the flint wheel entirely this time. Lisbeth has never seen anything like it. Based on what? Nothing really. Joe has now successfully become the person Lisbeth has seen least understand a lighter, from any direction, as long as she's been alive. It's like watching a cat become acquainted with an autonomous vacuum. I figured yours would be covered in stickers and glitter. 16th birthday type of deal. Lisbeth's chest tightens. Joe shakes the lighter, as if trying to develop it. I was going to ask if it was your brother's. I drive a Citroen, says Lisbeth, and she snatches both the lighter and the cigarette from Joe's hands. She lights the cigarette in one fluid motion, then puts it tremblingly to her lips. The first breath is a thick blue wash of relief. Joe slumps, wrinkling her flannel against the wall. The sequins on her dress wink sharply. So you don't smoke, says Lisbeth. No, Joe admits. She watches the long cat's tail of smoke wind out of the cigarette in Lisbeth's hands. Girls like it. This is Band Girls. I think we learned a lot about these characters here, which is why I read it today. And I've read it before at a reading I did for the republishing of my book. Because I like it a lot. It took me so long to write it. I had to run this by several people because you're not going to believe this, but I don't smoke. So I had to ask a lot of much cooler people if I had done anything correct. So here's what I would say we learned here, if anything. We learned that, well, Joe doesn't smoke, obviously, that she's kind of incompetent, that she clearly has some interest in Lisbeth, especially because she's, trying to impress her with cigarettes she doesn't know how to light. But she's not very good at it. She's kind of oblivious. She's not very good at, meeting Lisbeth where Lisbeth is at. That Lisbeth has some kind of anxiety issue, that she does not want to talk about her past or her family, that she has some derision for the idea of real and fake names. I wonder what that could mean. In an Yves story, who can say? And they have despite it all, some amount of chemistry because they just keep talking to each other. They just keep going back and forth. Um, and this is the kind of thing that I think fan fiction just luxuriates in. The back and forth dialogue, characters who have some kind of major difference, whether it's, in background or whether they don't like each other, or whatever it is, but they just keep winding up together. And if you just keep smacking them together, what happens? And dialogue is really, I think, where this shines because you get to just throw them at each other and see the things they'll say to each other when they're forced to interact. Though I will admit in this case that Elizabeth was just trying to go see somebody else, but then she saw Jo in the crowd and, she wanted to go looking for her and then she couldn't find her and she just kept looking for her. And so, that's some context as well, isn't it? That this is what's happening between them when Elizabeth just keeps trying to look for this girl who, let's be honest, has negative swag. She has a little swag. She has swag to me, but to most people, she doesn't have very much swag. The main feedback that I got on the story from the beta readers was that Jo sucks so bad and it felt very real, and they liked how much she sucks. All right, and now we're going hard mode. World building. People really don't believe you can learn anything about world building from fan fiction. And this boggles my mind. This absolutely boggles my mind. Because, so speaking personally, I'm going to be honest that I have a bias here. Because I'm not the most into world building. Give me the least that I have to know, and I'll figure it out from there. But that doesn't mean that I don't read world building and I don't, think about this a lot. I made the critical error as someone who's not really a world building person in working on a duology about a dimension traveling contract worker. So now I have to figure out how that works. I've been thinking about it for 5 years at this point. I like that we're getting so many responses in the chat from people who are really into world building, which exactly. And to be clear, it's not a, binary thing of do you like to world build or do you not like to world build necessarily. But I find that people who do a lot of fan fiction, they always have to take a stance of some kind because you have to think when your readers get there, how much do they know, right? They've almost certainly not researched as much as you have to write the thing you're writing. So you have to figure out how to convey enough about the world that the reader will understand what's going on, but little enough that you're not repeating things they've already read elsewhere. And this is pretty much exactly the same as if you had already written some amount of world building and you now had to figure out the next chapter from there. Or, frankly, coming up with a world and asking, how much does my narrator know? How much are they willing to impart? So informed by that, and I like that someone is saying in chat that the characters are informed by their setting. Exactly. These really aren't, I had to come up with categories for my slides, but these aren't as starkly differentiated as I think might be expected. I also should note, maybe I'm too late to say this, but all the brackets here and there are just wherever I'm, excising or changing something because I had to crop these out of longer pieces. So here's a bit where, tell me if you recognize this one, folks, from your favorite fan fictions. Atlas has gotten hurt, and Kay, who he's supposed to be protecting, is, feverishly wiping blood off of him. And she's so close to him, guys. It's like, oh my gosh. I read parts of this aloud to someone who's not interested in women, and they were very appealed by it. But I've had to give you the world building bit for now. I should say that Atlas is a transmasculine lesbian. Anyone? I haven't explicitly said it. He might be bisexual, but he has something sapphic going on, genderedly speaking. The gender affirming magical goop. Okay. Atlas bites his lip. He should probably be more used to pain. This is the kind of thing he should be able to sleep off by now. Isn't the point of being injected with supernatural whatever that you can take infinite hits and just keep going? Like in video games. Atlas is too whacked out to remember how video games work. He knows he's lucky to be alive under the circumstances. His body is, well, Atlas doesn't get this entirely, but it's allegedly at HQ right now, floating in some kind of science goop. He asked that guy Timothy in monitoring what it looks like, and apparently either like he's asleep or dead. And Atlas's current body, the one he's wearing, the one with his soul or his consciousness or whatever it is he's piloting, links up to the home dimension one like Wi-Fi and heals through the goop in the tank on the other side, which literally glows green, to the point that Atlas was at some point involved in a bet with some of the other neighborlies over whether that was its natural color or if it was dyed like soda. Timothy said he would just tell them, but nobody really wanted to know. I think this tells us quite a bit about our dimension traveling setting. This is not the very first time that we bring up Neighborly HQ, but it's one of the more telling pieces, I think. Atlas is a neighborly, which is just, a dimension traveling contract worker. I've had to memorize that phrase to try to explain what I'm writing to people for the last several years. And I think it says something in itself, why are they neighborlies? Why is that the term picked? Everyone knows if you're talking about HQ, something dire is going on. There's someone there named Timothy who seems to be treating it as a kind of desk job, but Atlas and the other neighborlies are, the ones who actually go into the field. I might change the Wi-Fi line because this is set in, I think this happens in around 2011, and I'm just trying to think what would be more 2011-ish. Not that we, back in 2011 we didn't have Wi-Fi, but I want something that's as, time specific as possible. Like he has an iPod, you know what I mean? It's, one of those like tiny ones that are like neon green. So I have to make everything as nostalgic as possible. But I mean, that also is a way in which I can try to get across the setting that we're in, because I'm trying to do a lot of things in this one. It's, we're taking place in roughly 2011, but Kay Rainier, who Alice is taking care of, this is from the one only universe of Kay Rainier, by the way. Kay lives in kind of an 1860s diorama situation. It's still 2011 where she is. It's just that her family is insane. So they're all walking around like Victorian cosplayers. And then at the same time, I also have this, very sci-fi science fantasy thing going on where the, technically speaking, Atlas is, I would say he's pretty much doing magic, but there has to be some kind of scientific explanation. That explanation is that HQ has figured it out and Atlas doesn't know what's going on and he does not care because Atlas took the job to make large amounts of money so he could protect his sister. Which tells us a lot about Atlas, but it also tells us a lot about how Neighborly HQ works, right? That they don't really care to tell him how things are happening. That if he was going to figure this out, it would be through some guy and not through like, terms and conditions that he's read. That either they were in there and he didn't read them, or they weren't in there because Neighborly HQ does not care if he knows, or maybe it's not relevant. But there's a lot of things the reader can get out of this, which I think is very similar to when you're writing in fan fiction, you're constantly thinking about how to get across the right amount of information without completely losing the person reading. And especially ship fic. If you are writing something about fundamentally a romantic attraction of some kind, how do you work things out so that you can get the world building in there without distracting the reader, without making the reader skim, without making the reader just, click off of the fic entirely? The stakes are high. I should say I'm over my time and I apologize, but also this is the last panel, so we have a little bit of freedom. The primary thing that I wanted to mention was the things that the fanfiction world tells you about the, quote-unquote IRL world. So here's the quote that I have here. It's from a blog post by Deepa D called I Didn't Dream of Dragons. Do not imagine that making it to print is some idealistic winnowing of quality. Someone once said to me when I told them how much smaller the publishing industry in India was compared to the American one, that they supposed that what was published then must be of the highest quality. It is not an equal playing field. This is from, first of all, if you recognize this quote, if you recognize this blog post, 1,000 DashCon points to you. You, good sir, have won the DashCon. Um, this is pre. This is from Live Journal, folks, in 2009. So this is from the old Race Fail '09, if anyone remembers that, um, which was to make a very long story extremely short, a lengthy discussion among fans, among authors, among people who were both about race in writing and representation and the way we discussed the above. It was very complicated. It was very, snarky, obviously the vast majority of the time. Um, I mean, it was called Brace Fail '09 for God's sake. This is the sort of thing. We have a tag for this, don't we? That's escaping me. Um, for like fandom discourse. That's not snark, but is similar. That I'm losing right now, of course, because I'm on the spot. But I think that, wank, thank you. Oh God, it's been so long. It's been so long since someone said fandom wank. Thank you. This was the wankiest of wank. Anyway, which to be clear doesn't mean it wasn't an interesting or important conversation. Quite on quite the contrary. A lot of things described as wank are actually very important to a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And I think that really what a lot of this whole debate about fan fiction and quote unquote original fiction and traditional publishing comes down to is that there's an arbitrary, at times, distinction made between, the internet and the real world, as if everybody posting on the internet isn't a real person. It's the people who are posting the fan fiction, who are clicking post, are people. The people who are discussing the fan fiction are people. You know, that's true, some of it except for the bots. But even then, there is a person who is making the bot for some requirement that they themselves have. And as such, there's a very similar, not identical, but a very similar environment in that, you know, you still worry about the reception of your piece just because people on average tend nowadays to be less likely to comment that they didn't like your prose on your fan. And I'm being very, I don't want to really say that's 100% true because I think anyone here who writes anything knows what it's like to get a negative comment on fan fiction. Particularly the people of color in the room, I think, know what it's like to make fan fiction and be told that it sucks because people don't want to read what you're writing. Um, it kind of annoys me when people do this whole, oh, fan fiction is a place where people are just constantly positive and no one ever says anything unkind to anyone, and that's how you won't know how the real world is. What are you talking about? What fandom are you in? Can I go there, please? Because that has never been my experience. I've found that fandom generally reflects the real world perspectives of the people engaging in it. Um, and this also means, when people say, well, fan fiction, people don't get critiqued on it. Also not true. Whose experience is this? It is not mine or anyone I know. Um, I'm not trying to say that, beta readers are falling into your lap out of the sky, especially for, trust me, I know. I've had some small fandoms where I was basically the only person writing, but there are beta readers. There is absolutely critique that you can solicit. There are swaps. Um, at least in my experience, when you have any kind of group of friends who are in fandom, you can ask them for their opinions. I've given my opinions on fic. I've received other people's opinion on my fic. A lot of this was the beginning of how I learned what I was good at and what I was not good at and what I should improve at. And I think also anyone who writes in this space also knows the feeling of like you put something in there and you think, God, this line bangs so hard, I'm a genius, and you publish it and you get so many comments and they're all complimenting everything other than the line, and you realize that maybe the line is not as good as you thought it was because clearly you're the only one who cared. So I think it teaches you a lot, even in terms of, even if you were to only get comments, hypothetically speaking, on the things people liked, you would still learn something about the things they did not comment on. And even if they did just tell you what you like, well, then you learn what you're good at. And I think in general, there's always this forever ongoing discussion on who is a fan and who's not a fan. Um, Given this was live journal, I think this was one of the first times that people really had to contend with the experience of fans speaking to authors directly. I won't get too into it, but we've seen a lot of this on Tumblr, right? Like, what is it like when you have an author you can talk to on Tumblr, and then something happens? Um, there are things that are absolutely new about the internet, obviously. I mean, when things are different, they are different. But in my experience, the internet serves to tell us a lot more about what real life is like than we might expect, because that's where we're all coming from. So I think there's a lot that you can learn, even on just a community scale, even just from the people around you, about what it is like to write something and to have it read by other people. Thank you for coming to my panel. Um, I think I'm allowed to take questions because, who's going to stop me? We're at almost 2 in the morning ET. Um, it's not like anyone else is going to be doing anything. And I am the last panel, that's correct. This has been really a strange experience in that I unfortunately couldn't make it to a lot of the panels because it was Shabbat today, which I observe. So the mods were very, very kind to give me this insane time because I genuinely could not have streamed any other time. So if anyone does have questions or thoughts, I do have, in case you're thinking, wow, I wish I had links to the things you were reading from, I wish I had links to who you are and what your blog is. Well, you are in luck because I'm posting in the chat right now. Let me know if something about that doesn't work or if I'm missing something, because I really do my best. Everyone's being so nice. My goodness. Thank you, very nice people. I do like that someone clocked that it's after sundown. I say I'm a vampire all the time, but I'm so glad people enjoyed this panel. I should say I also have a Discord for my writing, but it's, quite possibly incomprehensible if you don't know anything about who I am. But I can link that here if people would like. Everyone's been so nice. My goodness, thank you for having me.